Well, the big news this week is, of course, the signing of a peace agreement between Israel and Hamas. Hooray, at last, this Gaza war that's been raging for 2 years is finally over. And we should all be grateful. The death is ended, the hostages are being released, and huge credit goes to President Donald Trump and his team for finally negotiating such a long-awaited peace. In the news, the peace agreement is described as permanent and lasting, and I hope that's true. However, the Bible seems to show that in the future there will be more conflict in the region. Human nature tells me that just because governments sign peace treaties, that does not mean that people's hearts have changed. Hatreds, animosities, and grudges that have simmered under the surface for centuries and sometimes have erupted into out-and-out conflict, well, they don't just automatically disappear, do they? So I am hopeful, but I'm also wanting to be realistic. I'm sorry if I'm raining on everybody's parade. Just trying to figure out how this historic peace might actually be working in the meantime and how it might fit into what the Bible predicts for the future. I truly am thrilled at the peace agreement, and I hope it truly lasts. So here's the question. Is this agreement a sign of the end times? I'm sure many people are wondering about that. Many Bible experts believe that Daniel 9 foresees a world leader who will arise at the end of the age and make a peace pact with the Jews that is set to last for 7 years. However, in the middle of that 7 years, the leader will break the agreement and begin to put pressure on them, persecute them. According to this view, the Battle of Armageddon will then come as a culmination of these events when the nations of the world will attempt to eradicate Israel. So I don't think the animosity is going to go away permanently. Now, I'm not necessarily implying that the current peace agreement has any connection with those prophecies. I'm just saying that to describe the current peace agreement as permanent may be just a tad optimistic. All right, let's stop for a minute and talk about Israel. The current nation calling itself Israel adopted that name simply out of convenience. Did you know that? After World War II, Jews by the tens of thousands from Europe and the Americas and many other places began to migrate into what was then called Palestine. At the time, Great Britain had political oversight over the region. And when the flood of Jewish immigration began, the British were concerned, to say the least. The mass immigration of Jews into a land that was mostly populated by Arabs obviously caused a lot of tension. When the Jewish immigrants reached a certain population level, though, they began to work towards making a nation for themselves. Their thinking was that for hundreds of years they'd been scattered among the nations of the world and they'd never been really safe. So the only way that they could ensure their security was to have their own nation that they could govern and defend on their own terms. At first, the idea of a Jewish nation was rejected by almost all countries. But eventually, the United States and a few other nations agreed to support the concept of a Jewish state in the Middle East. Then in the spring of 1948, when it became clear that the United Nations would likely recognize a national entity for the Jewish people, the ruling council of the Jews in Palestine were faced with a problem. What would they call themselves? Remember that the people who settled in Palestine after World War II were mainly Jews. Historically, the people known today as Jews at best only represent elements of the ancient tribes of Judah, Benjamin, and Levi. The other ancient Israelite tribes were dispersed out of the region in the 700s BC and mostly lost their Israelite identity. So these Jews who were organizing this new nation in 1948 wondered what they should call it. Well, they debated several names among themselves. Some suggested Judea, which makes sense since it would be a Jewish state. However, under the United Nations plan, most of the ancient territory of the tribes of Judah and Benjamin were set to remain under Arab control. So that name was set aside. Others suggested Zion, and Zion was the ancient stronghold of the city of Jerusalem. But that name was also set aside because at the time, the area of Zion in Jerusalem was also to be under Arab control. Now, since then, Israeli forces conquered all of Jerusalem in the Six-Day War, and they annexed that portion of Jerusalem into the current Jewish state. The name Palestine was never really suggested because that was the name agreed upon by world nations for a proposed Arab state in the two-state solution idea. The Arab state of Palestine was never fully created, though. There were Arab-majority areas, however, set apart on what we now call the West Bank. Originally, those areas were ruled by Jordan. Now they are semi-self-governing, but subject to certain security controls by Israel. The Gaza Strip has more or less always been under Arab governance. And we'll see what happens to Gaza under this new peace agreement. So, reluctantly and almost at the last minute, the Jewish organizing bodies settled on the name Israel, even though most of Israel's ancient tribal units are not part of the current population, and much of its ancient territory is not controlled by the Israeli government. So what's to become of Gaza? Well, Israeli troops are to withdraw in stages. Hostages are to be released on both sides. Hamas, which is the radical group that has controlled Gaza in recent years, is to disarm and release power, first to a temporary peace board overseen by the United States and other countries, and eventually new leadership will be phased in to represent the people of Gaza. There will also need to be major investment in the economic development of Gaza, which will have to be almost completely rebuilt. So is this peace a sign of the end times? I think it's important to keep in mind that this current agreement does not solve all of the problems in the Middle East. It's focused on Gaza. For instance, it doesn't apply to the other large Palestinian area of the West Bank. There are still many tensions there for both Arabs and Israelis. Many sites holy to Christians and Jews are still within the Palestinian zones, including Bethlehem and Nazareth. Israeli settlements within the West Bank are also a cause of friction almost all the time. Neither does this peace fully resolve tensions between various Arab countries and Muslim factions. So will this historic peace hold? Let's hope so. Let's pray so. I say once again, congratulations to President Trump and his partners in this peace deal. This is definitely a win, and right now we'll take all the wins we can get. God bless the Middle East. God bless Gaza. God bless Israel. God bless us all. This is Dr. Michael Bogart.